I slumped back in the worn leather chair, the sterile scent of the clinic filling my nostrils as I waited for Dr. Henshaw. Doyle squeezed my hand reassuringly, his warm smile a stark contrast to the knot tightening in my stomach. We'd been trying for a baby for over a year, and this was supposed to be a routine checkup. The door swung open, and a flustered nurse bustled in, her arms laden with files. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter," she nodded, rifling through the papers. "Ah, congratulations are in order, it seems," she beamed at Doyle. "The little one is due in 7 months. Alara must be over the moon." The room tilted as the words hit me like a sledgehammer. Alara? A baby? My heart pounded in my ears as I shot Doyle an accusatory glare, but his brow was furrowed in confusion. I think you have the wrong file," he stammered, his face paling. The nurse's eyes widened, and she hastily checked the paperwork. "Oh, goodness, you're right. My apologies." She scurried out, leaving a suffocating silence in her wake. Doyle cleared his throat. "Marion, honey, it was just a mix-up. You know how scatterbrained some of these nurses can be." His words should have reassured me, but something nagged at the back of my mind. A tiny splinter of doubt that would soon fester into a gaping wound of betrayal. The drive home was a blur, the city lights melting into streaks of color as my mind raced. Doyle's reassurances rang hollow, drowned out by the nurse's words echoing in my head. Alara, a baby due in 7 months. As soon as we stepped through the front door, I rounded on him. "Who is Alara?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and dread. Doyle sighed, rubbing his temples. "Babe, it was an honest mistake, nothing more." "Don't babe me," I snapped. "I'm not an idiot, Doyle. That nurse clearly knew something I don't." His eyes narrowed. "You're overreacting, Marion. It was a simple mix-up of files, that's all." I opened my mouth to protest, but something in his coat pocket caught my eye, the corner of a crumpled receipt. Without thinking, I snatched it out. "Hey!" Doyle lunged for me, but I danced out of his reach, my heart pounding as I smoothed out the paper. Prenatal vitamins. The receipt was for a bottle of prenatal vitamins from a pharmacy downtown. I looked up at him, my vision blurring with tears. "Tell me the truth, Doyle, right now." His shoulders slumped in defeat. I don't know how to say this." "Try me," I growled through gritted teeth. He took a deep breath. "There's someone else. Alara. She's pregnant with my child." The words landed like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled back, clutching the receipt like a lifeline. Doyle reached out to me, his eyes pleading. "Marion, I'm so sorry. It just happened. But I still love you, I swear." I recoiled from his touch, bile rising in my throat. "How could you?" I choked out. "After everything we've been through, trying for a baby of our own?" He flinched, shame flickering across his face. I know, and I hate myself for it, but we can work through this, I promise." Rage bubbled up inside me, scalding and all-consuming. I grabbed the nearest object, a ceramic vase, and hurled it at him with all my strength. He ducked just in time, the vase shattering against the wall behind him. "Get out," I seethed, my body shaking with fury. "Get out of my house, you lying, cheating bastard." For once, Doyle didn't argue. He hung his head and trudged out the door, leaving me alone with the shards of my broken heart scattered at my feet. The next few weeks were a waking nightmare. I functioned on autopilot, going through the motions at work while my personal life crumbled around me. Doyle had moved out, taking his things while I was at the office. A small mercy, I supposed. I didn't think I could bear to see his face again so soon. Still, the questions swirled endlessly in my mind. How long had this been going on? Who was this Alara woman? And why, after all our struggles to conceive, would he throw it all away like this? I knew I needed answers, if only to find some shred of closure. So I started digging. It didn't take long to uncover the truth about Alara Benson, a 29-year-old graphic designer at a trendy marketing firm downtown. Social media painted the picture of a vivacious, free-spirited woman with a zest for life, the perfect counterpoint to my own sensible, by-the-book existence with Doyle. A few carefully worded inquiries revealed that she was indeed pregnant, just over 4 months along. The timeline matched the nurse's words at the clinic, confirming my worst fears. Doyle had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. But the deepest cut came from an unexpected source, my own fertility doctor, Dr. Henshaw. During a follow-up appointment, he made an offhand comment about Doyle's other obligations causing delays in our treatment plan. What other obligations? I demanded, my heart racing. Are you talking about his affair? Dr. Henshaw's eyes widened, and he immediately backpedaled. Mrs. Carter, I assure you, doctor-patient confidentiality prevents me from discussing Mr. Carter's private matters. But the damage was done. I felt a sickening pit open up in my stomach as the pieces fell into place. Dr. Henshaw had known about Doyle's infidelity all along and said nothing, allowing me to pour my heart and soul into a hopeless dream of starting a family with a man who had already moved on. I stormed out of his office, tears of rage and humiliation stinging my eyes. How could they have betrayed me like this? Doyle was one thing, but Dr. Henshaw was supposed to be on my side, guiding me through this arduous journey. As I sat in my car, the hurt and anger swirled together, hardening into a resolve as cold and unyielding as steel. They would pay for this, both of them. I would make sure of it, no matter what it took. Armed with Alara's address and a burning determination for vengeance, I showed up at her sleek downtown apartment building one evening after work. My heart was pounding as I buzzed her unit, half expecting her not to answer when a stranger's voice crackled through the intercom. Hello? I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. Alara Benson? My name is Marion Carter. I think we need to talk. There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. Come on up. The ride up in the elevator was agonizing, my palms slick with nervous sweat. What was I going to say? How would she react? The door swung open before I could think too hard, revealing a petite woman with tousled dark hair and a slightly rounded belly, the unmistakable curve of early pregnancy. You must be Marion, she said, her voice carefully neutral as she stepped aside to let me enter. I'm guessing this is about Doyle? I nodded mutely, unable to find the words as a fresh wave of hurt swept over me at the sight of her pregnant form. Alara sank onto the plush sofa, absently rubbing her stomach as she studied me with those soulful eyes. How much do you know? The question snapped me out of my stupor, anger flaring hot in my chest. Enough, I bit out. Enough to know that my husband knocked you up behind my back. She flinched at my harsh tone but held my gaze steadily. I had no idea he was married, Marion. Not at first. Of course he'd lied to her, too. Typical Doyle. I opened my mouth, ready to unleash the full force of my fury, but Alara held up a hand, cutting me off. Please let me explain. She took a deep, shuddering breath. We met at a work party back in August and just hit it off. Things moved quickly after that, but he assured me he was single, separated from his wife. I didn't find out the truth until a few weeks ago, when I happened to see a family photo of you two on his desk at home. My stomach churned at her words, the gravity of Doyle's betrayal hitting me all over again. Alara looked at me imploringly, tears shimmering in her eyes. I swear, Marion, if I'd known, I never would have gotten involved with him. You have to believe me. In that moment, as I stared at this woman carrying my husband's child, I saw the same hurt, the same anguish reflected in her expression that I felt clawing at my insides. We were both victims of Doyle's selfish lies. A twisted sense of kinship washed over me then, bonding us in our shared pain. This poor woman had been just as deceived as I was, maybe even more so. Slowly, I crossed the space between us and sank onto the couch beside her. I believe you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And Doyle is going to pay for what he did to both of us. Alara's eyes widened, then hardened with resolve. She gave a brisk nod. Tell me what you need me to do. The weeks leading up to Doyle's birthday party were a flurry of covert planning and deception. Alara and I worked tirelessly, coordinating every detail under the guise of throwing him a surprise celebration. Little did he know, we had something much more explosive in store. You're sure about this? Alara asked one evening as we pored over the guest list. There's no going back after tonight. I glanced around my living room at the cheerful decorations and gift-wrapped boxes stacked in the corner, all a carefully constructed ruse. Absolutely, he needs to be exposed in front of everyone who thinks he's this upstanding, trustworthy guy. Her jaw tightened and she gave a resolute nod. Then let's do it. The big day arrived and our plan unfolded perfectly. One by one, Doyle's colleagues, friends, even his own mother filed into my house, all eager to surprise the guest of honor. Finally, the man himself arrived, striding through the door with a bemused grin. What's all this? Surprise! We cried in unison, feigning delight as cameras flashed and people swarmed around to greet him. For a moment, Doyle just blinked at the crowd, utterly blindsided. Then his gaze found mine, and his expression shifted to one of wariness. "Marion?" "Happy birthday, darling," I said, layering on sugary sweetness as I crossed the room to give him a lingering kiss on the cheek. "We've got one more surprise for you." Alara stepped forward then, her blossoming baby bump impossible to miss. A hush fell over the room as realization dawned on Doyle's face. "You," he choked out, paling rapidly. "What are you doing here?" "Congratulations, babe," I said with saccharine venom. "You're going to be a father." Stunned silence hung in the air, punctuated only by a few shocked gasps from the crowd. Doyle's eyes darted around wildly, like a cornered animal. "Marion, Alara, please," he began desperately. "This wasn't how I wanted you to find out." A derisive snort came from the back of the room. "Find out you've been lying and cheating, you mean?" I turned to see Doyle's mother pushing through the throng, fury etched into every line of her face as she regarded her son with disgust. "How could you, Doyle? How could you do this to these poor women?" It was like a dam bursting. Furious whispers and accusations rippled through the guests as the truth sank in. Colleagues, friends, people who had trusted and respected Doyle now looked at him with contempt. I drank in every agonizing second, watching his world crumble before my eyes just as mine had weeks ago. This was karma, plain and simple. Doyle whirled on me, anguish and anger warring on his features. "Is this what you wanted, Marion? To humiliate me in front of everyone I know?" Meeting his gaze, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "It's what you deserve." The fallout from Doyle's birthday party was swift and brutal. Within days, news of his sordid affair had spread like wildfire, destroying his once sterling reputation in our small community. But that was just the start of his reckoning. I'll never forget the morning his boss, Richard Henderson, showed up at my door. The grim-faced CEO had clearly heard the rumors and demanded to know the truth. "Is it true, Marion?" he asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Has Doyle been unfaithful?" I met his gaze steadily, no trace of pity for the man who had so callously betrayed my trust. "It's true, Richard. He got another woman pregnant while we were trying to have a baby of our own." Richard's shoulders slumped, and he removed his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose. "You have to understand, this is a family company with strong moral values." He trailed off, but I knew exactly what he meant. Marketing Millennial Solutions had built its brand on the persona of happy, wholesome influencers, the last people you'd expect to be embroiled in a salacious cheating scandal. "I see," I said, folding my arms across my chest. "So what happens now?" Richard let out a weary sigh. "I'm afraid his position is untenable. There's a strict morality clause in all our employee contracts. Infidelity." He shook his head. "I have no choice but to terminate Doyle's employment, effective immediately." Just like that, Doyle's high-powered marketing career, the culmination of years of hard work and ruthless ambition, went up in flames, all because he couldn't keep it in his pants. I should have felt vindicated, or at least satisfied that he was finally facing real consequences for his actions. But as I watched Richard's car pull away, I realized this was only the beginning. The lawyers came next, first mine, then Alara's. Turns out my dear husband's indiscretions had opened him up to a tidal wave of legal troubles on top of his professional disgrace. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, breach of contract, the charges piled up, each one another nail in the coffin of the life Doyle had so meticulously constructed. He tried to fight it at first, pleading with me to show mercy, to think of all our years together. But I was unswayed. His pleas fell on deaf ears. Alara, too, was unrelenting in her demands for restitution, adamant that he take responsibility for the harm he'd caused us both. In the end, the courts sided with the wronged women, awarding us both substantial settlements directly from Doyle's assets and future earnings. The financial blow was as devastating as the public humiliation, stripping him of the wealth and status he'd so coveted. As I watched the once confident, successful man slink away in disgrace, I felt an odd sense of hollowness. This was the vengeance I'd sought, the karma I'd craved, and yet it didn't bring the closure or relief I'd expected. Doyle was ruined, his world in ashes around him. But the anguish of his betrayal still lingered deep within me, an open wound that may never fully heal. In the weeks following the legal fallout, Doyle became a shadow of his former self. Gone was the cocky swagger, the easy confidence that had once drawn me to him. Now he just seemed broken. Not that I had any sympathy left for the man who had so thoroughly shattered my trust and our vows. If anything, seeing him reduced to a hollow husk only reinforced my resolve. He tried, in his own pathetic way, to make amends. Endless apologies and promises to change his ways, to be the man I deserved. But his words rang hollow, meaningless platitudes from someone desperate to cling to the lie of the life we'd once shared. Alara, at least, wanted nothing to do with his groveling. She'd made it clear from the start that she planned to cut Doyle out of her life completely once the baby was born, raising the child free from his toxic influence. I almost envied her certainty, her ability to simply walk away and start fresh. For me, the wounds went deeper, the scars of his betrayal an ever-present ache in my heart. Then one rainy evening, there was a heavy knock at my door. I opened it to find Doyle on my doorstep. Shoulders hunched against the downpour, a familiar hangdog expression etched into his features. "Marion," he said hoarsely, water dripping from his soaked hair. "We need to talk." Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, to shut him out, as he had shut me out of his life for all those months with Alara. But something in his haunted eyes gave me pause. With a resigned sigh, I stepped back to let him in from the rain. "Make it quick, Doyle. I'm done playing games." He flinched at my blunt words, then nodded solemnly as he followed me into the living room. "I know, and you're right. You deserve better than any more of my lies and deception." For a moment he seemed to struggle, Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "I came to say goodbye, Marion, and to beg for your forgiveness one last time." I opened my mouth, a biting retort on my lips, but he pressed on, his voice thick with emotion. "What I did, there are no excuses, no justifications for the pain I caused you and Alara. I was selfish and arrogant, taking both of you for granted in my pursuit of... I don't even know what, honestly." His gaze, those warm brown eyes that had once made my heart skip a beat, bored into me with raw sincerity. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Marion, and I threw it all away like a damn fool." I swallowed hard past the lump forming in my throat, my anger slowly ebbing in the wake of his chillingly honest confession. A part of me, the part that still stubbornly clung to the memories of the man I'd fallen in love with, wanted so badly to offer him absolution. But I knew that was impossible now. Too much had happened, too much trust betrayed. The old Doyle, the man I thought I knew, was gone, and no amount of pleading would undo the rift he himself had created. So instead, I simply said, "Goodbye, Doyle. I hope you can find some measure of peace, for your sake, but we're through." His face crumpled for the briefest moment before the mask slipped back into place, leaving only a haunted sort of resignation behind. With a somber nod, he turned and let himself out, the door clicking shut behind him with a sobering finality. I stood there alone in the silence, raindrops pattering against the windows, wondering if that gaping void in my heart would ever heal. The months that followed were a slow, painful process of picking up the shattered pieces of my life and trying to rebuild. Doyle's betrayal had left me adrift, questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the dreams we'd once shared. But I was determined not to let his selfish actions define me. I was more than just a scorned wife. I was a strong, capable woman who deserved a fresh start. The settlement from the legal battles had left me with a sizable nest egg, enough to finally pursue that long-deferred dream of opening my own cozy little bookshop. It seemed fitting, in a way, surrounding myself with stories altri, finding solace between the pages when my own narrative had taken such a dark turn. I spent weeks scouring property listings until the perfect spot opened up, a quaint corner storefront in a charming downtown district. From the moment I stepped inside the aging but sturdy brick building, I could envision it all. Overstuffed armchairs flanking a fireplace, shelves brimming with well-loved tomes, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. Transforming that empty shell into my literary haven was grueling work, between renovations, sourcing inventory, and handling all the logistical minutiae of opening a small business. But I poured myself into the project, finding refuge in the simple, methodical tasks that allowed me to push Doyle and all the pain of his deception to the back of my mind, if only for a little while. The day we opened our doors, I could scarcely believe how far I'd come. As I watched the first customers trickle in, marveling at the cozy book-lined interior with its plush seating and the inviting espresso bar, a sense of pride swelled in my chest. This was my life, my passion, profoundly my own, in a way nothing with Doyle ever could be. In the months that followed, the shop became my sanctuary, a cherished space where I could connect with others over the shared love of a good story. I savored the daily interactions with my patrons, swapping recommendations and bonding over the ability of the written word to transport, console, and inspire us. It was during one such chat with a regular customer that I heard the news. Alara had given birth to a healthy baby girl and left town shortly after, determined to start over somewhere far from the lingering shadows of Doyle's deceit. I couldn't begrudge her that. We had both been through the emotional ringer, and she deserved the chance to raise her daughter in peace, unburdened by the past. In a way, we were kindred spirits, joined by our shared trauma yet emerging from the ashes like twin phoenixes, reborn and resolute in our fresh beginnings. Though our paths had diverged, I knew a part of me would always be bound to Alara through the crucible of Doyle's betrayal that had ultimately brought us together. We exchanged numbers through the customer who had relayed the news, and a few days later, my phone pinged with an image, Alara cradling her newborn daughter, both of them bathed in golden sunlight. A simple caption accompanied the picture. "Here's to new chapters." As I traced the curve of the tiny infant's face, I felt a profound sense of release wash over me. Like Alara, I too was turning the page and allowing the hurt to finally begin fading. Our story may have started in darkness and deception, but we had both found the courage to rewrite our own endings, this time on our own terms. "How could you do this to us?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Clara, my daughter-in-law, peered at me over the dining table, eyebrows raised in feigned innocence. "Do what, Meredith?" My face burned. We were all gathered at Clara and Ethan's luxurious home, one of Clara's over-the-top dinner parties, meant to celebrate my grandson Aiden's acceptance to Columbia University. At least, that's what I thought. "You didn't make anything for us?" Alan, my husband of 30 years, spoke softly beside me. His eyes held more hurt than anger. "But you knew we were coming." Clara laughed lightly, the sound grating against my nerves. "Oh, I just didn't have the time today. Anyway, we'll order something later. This party is for Aiden, not you." I bit my tongue, the metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. "Easy, Meredith. Not now." I smiled tightly. "Of course, whatever Aiden wants." I watched my grandson, a tall 18-year-old with his father's gentle eyes. He stood surrounded by his rowdy friends, oblivious to the tension. A twinge of sadness caught in my chest. We had helped raise him, Alan and I. We had gifted him his first bicycle, sat beside his hospital bed when he broke his arm skateboarding, and now helped pay those towering college tuition bills. And this was how his mother treated us. Like burdens, unwanted guests. I felt Alan's weathered hand close around mine. "We're happy you can provide all this for Aiden," Alan said evenly. "Columbia is expensive, though. Let us know if you need." Clara waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, please. Ethan makes plenty." Her voice dropped. "Certainly more than a school teacher's pension or whatever measly salary comes from working at a library." The room tilted. "Our jobs are honest, not something to be ashamed of," I managed. This wasn't the first barb about our average middle-class life. But on tonight of all nights, it stung. Who said anything about shame? Clara's eyes glinted. "But let's be real. Your little check isn't making any dent in Columbia's tuition. Maybe if you'd had more to invest when Ethan was young." "Clara, that's quite unfair." Ethan finally spoke up from her side, frowning. "Mom and Dad help how they can." Clara snorted. "Yeah, buy the kid a computer and call it a day. That laptop was top of the line, young lady. We scrimped and saved." Alan sounded properly angry now. "Then where is it?" Clara challenged. "I never see Aiden using it." "He loves that computer," I jumped in, though my mind spun wondering the same thing. Where did it go? Aiden was attached to all his electronics. Clara checked the diamond Rolex on her wrist. "Look, the catering van will be here soon. Are we done?" "Done?" I fought to steady my voice. "Stay calm, Meredith. I suppose we are, for now." I rose on unsteady legs, Alan's strong arm coming around me. We managed strained goodbyes to Ethan before escaping into the cold night air. As Alan's sedan pulled out of the long driveway, tears burned in my eyes. That laptop was only the first of many gifts we'd given Aiden over the years. Gifts from our hearts, not our wallets. And tonight, it had all been thrown back in our faces. What else of ours had Clara tossed aside? The thought made my stomach turn. 30 years of marriage and family life, and one spoiled, greedy woman threatened to tear it all down on a senseless whim. I dashed the bitter tears away as Alan and I drove home in silence through the dark suburban streets. No, I decided, gripping the worn leather seat until my knuckles whitened. This wasn't over yet. I refused to let her win. The next morning, I sipped my coffee, unable to shake Clara's stinging words. My gaze fell on the living room bookshelf lined with framed photos. Birthdays, holidays, Aiden's first lost tooth. Our family moments filled the shelves. Would Clara toss those aside too if she got the chance? "We should check in on Aiden," Alan said, sinking into his recliner with the newspaper. "Make sure his party went well after we left." I nodded. "You're right, I'll video call him later." I rose to clear our mugs. As I rinsed them in the sink, my phone dinged from the counter. A Facebook notification. Frowning, I picked it up. Aiden had posted a new profile picture. I smiled, seeing his handsome grin, his arm slung around a pretty brunette. But my eyes caught on the background. A shiny new laptop sat open behind him. What? I peered closer. The laptop in the photo was sleek, slim, and definitely not the bulky gaming computer we had gifted him. "Alan," my voice came out strangled. "Come look." He hurried over, face paling when he saw the image. What in blazes? "She sold it," I leaned weakly against the counter. "She must have, probably for one of her shopping sprees." Since marrying Ethan, Clara had developed a love for fast cars, fancy clothes, exotic getaways, anything to flaunt her wealth, it seemed. Alan's face hardened. "I'm calling our son." Snatching up his cell phone, he jabbed at the screen. My heart pounded as I listened to the ringing tone. "Dad, everything okay?" Ethan sounded distracted when he finally answered. Voices and clinking glasses echoed behind him. He must still be hosting guests. "Where's the computer your mother and I gave Aiden?" Alan cut right to it. A pause. "What? The laptop?" Alan insisted. "The one we bought him for college prep. Where is it?" "Oh, that old thing." Ethan seemed to muffle the phone, his voice growing faint. "Hey, babe, what happened to that computer my parents gave?" His words faded out. I held my breath. Alan's fist clenched white. Finally, Ethan returned. "Yeah, Aiden said he hasn't used that one in months. It was getting pretty slow anyway, so Clara bought him an upgrade." Alan exploded. "We spent good money on that laptop. Did you sell it for one of her shopping sprees? Some fancy watch or purse for Clara?" No, Dad." Ethan sounded shocked by Alan's eruption. "The hard drive was failing," Aiden said. "Clara got him a solid-state one, much faster processor. It wasn't cheap." Alan deflated on the couch, shaking his head warily. "So our gift wasn't good enough, once again. You know how Clara is, always needing the newest and best." Ethan trailed off awkwardly. "Yes, we knew exactly how Clara was, greedy, irrational, fixated on status." I squeezed Alan's shoulder as he ended the call. We sat in disheartened silence. Something still didn't sit right within me. That gaming laptop had still been perfectly new. And Aiden loved high-end electronics. He wouldn't neglect a still functional device. There had to be more going on. Over the next week, I observed Clara more closely during our brief interactions. Her behavior raised more red flags, expensive outfits and accessories popping up, recurring emergency expenses that prompted her to borrow money from Ethan's account. Once, while dropping off groceries, I spotted an unpaid medical bill on their kitchen counter with an urgent final notice stamp. Yet when Alan and I discreetly offered help, Clara became defensive. "We're fine. Just fine," she insisted, laughing it off. "Ethan takes good care of me." But the signs of financial distress still slipped through the cracks in her entitled facade. My suspicion solidified into an uncomfortable certainty. Something secretive was festering in my daughter-in-law's pampered life, and I had to find out what. "Do you think Clara would accept money from us?" I asked Alan one evening as we tidied up after dinner. He paused, wiping the table to give me a wary look. "What brought this on?" I twisted the dish rag tightly in my hands. "I know Ethan makes good money, but they never seem to have enough. The medical bills, her shopping, something doesn't add up. I thought maybe we could help take some pressure off." Alan shook his head. We can't go throwing money at their problems, Mir. Clara won't change. She'll just keep asking for more. I knew he was right. I finished the dishes in defeated silence. Later in bed, I picked up my tablet, scrolling mindlessly through photos of Aiden, my sweet grandson somehow born to that selfish woman. College was just around the corner for him. We had already drained part of our retirement savings to cover the tuition Clara and Ethan couldn't afford. I couldn't bear seeing him stranded due to his mother's issues. As I gazed at a photo of Aiden in his high school graduation cap and gown, an idea struck me. Clara seemed obsessed with status and prestige. That desire had driven which college she pushed Aiden to attend. What if we could use that to our advantage, offer them more money, but ensure it actually went to Aiden's future this time? The next time Clara extended her hand asking for help, I made the proposal over lunch. As expected, her painted lips curved into an eager smile. "Oh, we couldn't possibly accept, Meredith," she declined with fake humility. "That's too generous." I kept my tone casual. "Nonsense. He's our only grandson. We want to invest in his future, and Columbia has so many opportunities. We don't mind dipping into our savings if it's for Aiden." Right on cue, Clara's manicured hand shot out to clutch my arm. "Well, in that case, if you insist." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Who knows if Ethan's job will even last in this economy? It would be wise to set up a nest egg for our boy." My stomach turned at the false sincerity oozing from her. Still I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Maybe a college fund, for Aiden's direct use when he's on campus?" "Please take the bait," I thought. Clara laughed loudly. "Oh gosh, no, we'd invest it into one of Ethan's portfolios for the best return. Can't have money just sitting around. But I promise it would benefit Aiden in the end." She leaned in with a wink. "It can be our little secret from Ethan. You know how hard it is for dads to let their babies grow up." Gotcha. My hands clenched under the table. Anything for her selfish gain, even secrecy from my own son. At that moment, my decision solidified. Clara would pay a price for this endless greed and manipulation. I only prayed her schemes hadn't yet sunk Aiden's future. Over the next months, I withdrew the last of our carefully built savings, transferring it in small chunks into the separate account Clara discreetly set up. With each payment, I made sure to remind her, "This is Aiden's college money, every cent." Clara would respond with a conspiratorial grin. Of course. Consider it his rainy day fund on campus." Yet the strain never left her eyes. She continued borrowing cash from Ethan, juggling bills and debts. Once I noticed a bookie's collection notice tucked into her mailbox. So exactly where was all our money going? The black hole of Clara's reckless spending didn't seem to have a bottom, and I intended to expose it wide open, for Aiden's sake. My husband and I now spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, our lifelong security gone. But it would be worth it. I would make sure of that. We had sacrificed too much already for our family. It was time Clara did the same. I awoke early on Aiden's 18th birthday, sadness and anger already souring my stomach. Ever since we drained our savings for his cryptic college fund, Clara had grown distant. My weekly calls to check on Aiden now went straight to voicemail. Any visit requests were met with an automated, "We're so busy right now" text. But there was no way she could blacklist us from Aiden's milestone birthday. I dressed in my best black slacks and cream blouse while Alan dug out an old sport coat. "Hard to believe our grandson's all grown up," he murmured. We smiled softly at each other, clinging to nostalgic memories, the only way we seemed able to hold on to Aiden lately. My breath caught as we pulled up outside their sleek modern home, the long driveway crowded with luxury cars. Of course, Clara was throwing one of her over-the-top bashes. At least 20 strangers milled about sipping cocktails on the broad-back patio. No sign of Aiden yet. I steadied my nerves as we approached Clara, welcoming her glittering guests. Sharp as always in a curve-hugging red cocktail dress, she raised her sculpted brows at us, her eyes flashing. "Meredith, Alan, you're early." Was that annoyance in her syrupy voice? Before I could respond, she called out loudly, "The waitstaff is still setting up inside, but don't worry, I'll have them take your things." On cue, a young waiter hurried over. Clara air-kissed my cheeks, whispering, "We'll chat later, okay?" Then she vanished into the sparkling crowd. My face burned as the waiter led us awkwardly through the lavish, unfamiliar house. These people sipping bubbly were not our peers. They're Clara's friends, other society wives, executives, bankers, people who wouldn't glance twice at a retired teacher and a library clerk. My fists clenched, nails biting into my palms. We found Aiden out back at the patio bar, downing a shot with his school friends. His handsome face lit up when he saw us. "Grandma! Gramps!" He rushed over, sweeping me into a big hug. I clung to his sturdy shoulders, overwhelmed with bittersweet joy. My boy, my sweet boy. "Happy birthday, kiddo," Alan said gruffly, clapping Aiden's back. His voice had gone hoarse. "Thanks for coming, guys," Aiden said. "Mom's kind of going overboard as always. But stick around, okay? You gotta see my awesome presents." He grinned excitedly, then raced off to greet more arrivals. We settled awkwardly on patio chairs, watching the young partygoers laugh and shout around us. The DJ turned the music deafening. An hour dragged by. No sign of Clara or Aiden. My head throbbed from the pulsating songs about fast cars and money and sex, each lyric like a paper cut. Finally, Clara reappeared, a glittering vision in red. "Cake time," she announced in a shrill, girlish voice. My gut told me she'd had a few drinks already, even though it was barely sunset. The guests whooped, clustering around an elaborate 5-tier cake glowing with sparklers. Clara spotted us hanging back and swayed over with a sly smile. "Well, if it isn't my favorite in-laws scurrying out of their middle-class bubble. Have you ever seen a birthday cake like this?" She didn't wait for a response, calling for Aiden to make a wish. I watched my grandson close his eyes dutifully before blowing out the fiery candles. My throat tightened. Not long ago, birthdays were an intimate family affair around our wooden kitchen table. His favorite dinners, scratch cake from Grandpa, thoughtful gifts picked out with care, not price tags. Now we were alien spectators from Clara's realm of excess. After cake, Clara air-kissed Aiden's cheek. "Present time, baby. Let's see all these goodies from Mama." The DJ killed the music so she could hand Aiden boxes of sleek electronics, gaming gear, expensive clothing. The stack just kept growing. Finally, Clara announced breathlessly, "Ready for the big finale, birthday boy?" She paused, smirking right at me. "Hit it, DJ!" The pounding music returned as a shiny black BMW coupe rolled up the driveway, a giant red bow on top. The crowd roared their approval. I stared numbly as Aiden hugged his mother, stumbling over effusive thanks. Over Clara's shoulder, her smug gaze met mine. In her glittering, golden eyes, I read the challenge loud and clear. Just try competing with this. The BMW's engine roared as Aiden's friends shouted their admiration. I watched my grandson grin from ear to ear, drunk on luxury and privilege, with no idea the cost. My legs shook as I rose from the patio chair. "Leaving already?" Clara appeared at my side, all faux concern. I breathed deeply, clutching my sweater around myself. "We'll get out of your way now. Clearly you have quite the party fund." I kept my voice even. Alan took my hand supportively. For a second, Clara's smile slipped. "At least your gift stack isn't too shabby this year," she pushed with an arched brow. "Hope you saved some retirement money for the Rolex, bro. Aiden will want next year, though." With a brassy laugh, she vanished into her circle of glittering guests. We left in defeated silence. As Alan drove us away, I stared fixedly out the window, palms clammy in my lap. Hot tears pushed at the backs of my eyes, but I refused them escape. How long would Clara keep diminishing us? Until we had nothing left, not money, dignity, or family. Back home, I went immediately to my laptop, fingers trembling over the keyboard. Please still be there. Drawing a stealing breath, I logged into the hidden account Clara had my drain livelihood into these long months. Blood roared in my ears as the balance loaded on screen. The world tilted around me. $200,000, our entire life savings meant for Aiden's college, gone without a trace. And Clara's money pit kept demanding more. My voice came out a cracked whisper, "No more." At that moment, something solid and unmoving rooted deep inside me. No more bowing and scraping so Clara could swan around flashing her designer labels. No more tight smiles while our grandson became a stranger obsessed with status. This ended now, even if I had to tear apart my own family roots in the process. Clara had committed the ultimate betrayal. Alan held me as I wept furious, helpless tears into the late hours of night. But when the sun rose, my resolve remained, cold and steady as steel. Clara had treated me as weak too long. Now she would witness my strength firsthand. I spent the next week gathering every ounce of evidence documenting Clara's financial deceit. Printouts of bank statements showing money transfers she denied receiving, copies of ignored medical bills and debts, records of sold possessions she claimed were broken, photos revealing her in luxury resorts after borrowing cash for groceries. I moved with quiet, methodical calm while fury raged inside me. My lifelong passivity had allowed this rotten infection to fester. No more. The time had come for our grandson to see his mother clearly for the manipulative, selfish liar she was, whatever it cost. Soon after, the phone rang showing Ethan's number. My pulse spiked, but I kept my tone casual as I answered. "Ethan, how nice of you to call. Hey, Mom." His serious voice set me instantly on edge. "Have you talked to Clara lately?" I sank onto the sofa, files of evidence surrounding me. "We chatted a few weeks ago. Why do you ask?" "Please tell me you've wised up to her." Ethan paused before responding. "I'm worried about Aiden's college money. Clara got me to invest almost everything in this cryptocurrency startup, said she had a good feeling about it, but the CEO just got indicted for fraud. The assets are all frozen now. I think it might all be gone." His breath came ragged. "Our boy's future, everything we saved?" "This everything you and your father saved, you mean?" Red-hot rage flooded my veins, almost choking me, but I managed to keep my tone flat. "Oh, Ethan, that's terrible." In the heavy silence, I swore I heard the last tie between me and my greedy daughter-in-law snap clean apart. She had flown too close to the sun on wings of her lies. Now it was time for her long, crushing plummet back to reality, with my family in tow. "Come to dinner in 2 nights," I told Ethan evenly. "Bring Aiden. We have a lot to discuss." I set 2 extra plates around the dinner table, my pulse fluttering with anticipation. After years of Clara slowly whittling away our dignity, tonight the axe would fall on her web of lies at last. Right on time, the front door flew open. "Grandma! Gramps!" Aiden came loping in, grinning from ear to ear. I squeezed his broad shoulders, drinking in that familiar smile I feared Clara stealing away for good. Ethan followed behind, his face lined and weary. My son, my first baby, now a father himself, needing my protection once again from his scheming wife's selfish ploys. I ushered them into the small, cozy dining room. Clara always mocked my homey decor, but I now felt grateful for the intimacy. No glittering strangers to bear witness tonight, just truth unveiled between family. "Sorry Clara couldn't join us," Ethan said tersely as we dished up steaming bowls of beef stew. "She had some last-minute appointment." Likely concocting another excuse for the missing college fund, I thought bitterly. But I held my tongue. Tonight, Clara's own actions would speak for her. We made stilted small talk through dinner about Aiden's college plans, carefully dancing around the massive financial elephant in the room. As we finished dessert, Ethan finally broke. "Okay, sorry. I know this is awkward, but we need to talk, Mom." He leaned forward, elbows braced on the tablecloth I had stitched myself ages ago. "Aiden's tuition money that Clara made me invest, it's gone. All of it. I don't understand where it... Gone?" My sharp tone sliced him short. I rose slowly from my chair, nodding at Alan. As one, we turned our eyes on Aiden, his dear face so innocent and oblivious. No more. Without a word, I retrieved the heavy box of Clara's financial records from our bedroom, returning to lift the lid. Reams of secrets and deceit. I inhaled slowly, meeting my grandson's curious gaze. "Aiden, your college money didn't just vanish. The truth is, your mother took it. She lied to you and your father. Lied to Alan and I too." My voice rang clear as a bell in the heavy silence. Ethan's eyes blew wide in shock. But Aiden just frowned, glancing between all our taut faces. "Mom took it? What do you mean?" In response, I simply started laying out the evidence piece by piece. Bank statements recording money transferred, then quickly spent, not on groceries or clothes, but designer purses, exotic getaways, scratch-off lottery tickets, default and collections notices on thousands in medical debt. Records detailing possessions of ours she had sold behind our backs, and most damning, the emptied college fund she sworn was safely invested. With each incriminating paper, Ethan's face grew paler, while Aiden shifted with visible discomfort. Yet I maintained merciless eye contact with my grandson. He needed to see exactly who his mother was. A manipulator who would rob even her own son's future just to fuel her endless selfish greed. "Why?" Aiden finally rasped into the ringing silence. "How could Mom do this? His broad shoulders trembled as he turned to his father. "Dad?" Ethan just gazed back, hollow-eyed with shock. So I answered gently, because she felt entitled to maintain a certain image and lifestyle, no matter who suffered. Because your father and I kept letting her cross lines without consequence. I reached out to clasp Aiden's shaking hand, and she counted on you never realizing how she took advantage of this family's trust and love. At that moment, Aiden lifted his head. Our eyes met, his shimmering with angry, unshed tears. But behind the fury and pain, I now glimpsed clarity. He finally recognized Clara for the shallow, selfish liar she was. The woman who would gamble away her own child's future just to keep up the illusion of extravagant wealth a little longer. In redeeming my grandson's truth, I had also won back his trust, and that victory was sweeter than any revenge I could ever extract on Clara. The damning evidence lay strewn across the table between us. Aiden stared down at his mother's web of deceit, shoulders hunched in disbelief. My strong grandson reduced before my eyes to a wounded little boy once again. I squeezed his arm gently. "I know this is a shock, but try to remember the mother you knew before all this." I waved my hand over the records of Clara's obsessive greed. Underneath everything, that heart still beats inside her. Ethan scraped a trembling hand down his unshaven face. "I just don't understand. Why hide so much debt and lies behind my back? We're married, for God's sake." As if summoned, the front door suddenly banged open. Clara's shrill voice preceded her wafting cloud of Chanel No. 5. Absolute disaster. He promised everything would be ready. Her made-up face appeared as she clicked into the dining room, stopping short. "Oh, you all look cozy." Aiden's head jerked up, eyes red-rimmed but narrowing. Clara glanced between our taut expressions, her sharp gaze hesitating on the incriminating documents displayed on her son's college fund. The box of Pandora now thrown open, its secrets laid bare across her meticulous world of illusion. For one breathless moment, I thought I glimpsed a shadow of remorse or fear crack her polished veneer. But then Clara drew herself tall, armor of entitlement and arrogance clicking back into place. "Well, this looks intense for a weeknight dinner party," she laughed lightly. "What exactly did I interrupt?" One sculpted brow arched as her shrewd eyes dared us to speak the truth. Dared us expose her right to Aiden's face. Beside me, Alan cleared his throat gruffly. "Your little financial circus act, it's over, Clara. We know everything." "Dad, no?" Ethan half rose from his chair, hands raised in pleading reconciliation. But Aiden stood abruptly, chair skidding back. His young face had set like stone. For a moment, he just gazed at his mother until Clara shifted on her designer heels. "Okay, seriously, what is going on?" she demanded with a tinkling, nervous laugh. When no one answered, her sharp eyes narrowed, honing in on me. "Have you been telling stories again, Meredith?" I rose slowly. "No stories this time, just facts." I gestured calmly to the evidence arrayed across my grandmother's tablecloth like a prosecutor. Bank statements, default notices, sold possessions, an emptied college fund. Shall I go on? Clara paled under her perfect makeup. She stood motionless except for one manicured finger compulsively twirling her diamond necklace. The incriminating paper crinkled loudly as Aiden snatched up a default notice, his young voice cracking. "Is it true? You spent all my tuition money, just so you could buy fancy purses and clothes?" "Aiden, sweetheart." Clara glided toward him, palms raised beseechingly. "Let's talk about this later, just us. Your grandmother clearly has some wild idea." "Don't." Aiden recoiled from her outstretched hands, face mottled red in outrage. "Grandma showed me bank records. You lied for years and stole from my college fund." His accusatory words rang out like gunshots in the heavy air. "Tell me the truth, Mom. For once, just stop lying." Clara froze, manicured fingers suspended inches from her son's arm. Her mouth opened soundlessly as she slowly scanned our circle of faces. Ethan's downcast in shame, mine set like stone, Alan's etched with weary disappointment. No allies left for her games and manipulations. Finally, Clara turned back to Aiden. For a long, taut moment, their identical hazel eyes clashed, one pair seeking truth, the other guarding secrets. When Clara spoke at last, her usual breezy melodic tones had sharpened to a fine, brittle edge. "I did it for us, Aiden, for our family. Your father and I only want what's best." "By spending money meant for my college?" Aiden shot back. "How does that help me, Mom?" Clara flinched as though slapped. In the ringing silence, Ethan slowly stood and crossed the room to gently draw Aiden against his side. Father and son united as they gazed at this superficial, selfish woman who had manipulated their family nearly to ruin. The axe had fallen at last. Now we would see just what, if anything, remained standing in the wreckage Clara herself caused. In the ringing silence, Clara scanned our hard faces, searching for a shred of empathy. Finding none, she attempted a weak laugh. Clearly, there's been some misunderstanding here. When no one reacted, she drew herself straighter. The tuition financing just didn't work out as I planned, but I only wanted the best for Aiden. I stepped forward, blood pounding in my ears. The best? You gambled away his future on selfish whims without a second thought. Clara rounded on me, manicured finger raised like a weapon. So I'm the villain just for trying to give my son the lifestyle he deserves? I saw a chance to set us up for life, and I took it. With money you swore was earmarked for college, Alan cut in raggedly. Our grandson's education, his whole future. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Clara waved a dismissive hand. Ethan makes good money, we would have figured something out. Aiden pulled away from his father's comforting grip. No, Mom, it's not just the tuition. You've been lying for years. His young face radiated fiery disappointment. Whenever Grandma and Gramps gave me gifts, you sold them behind my back. Birthday money, my computer. Ethan's head jerked toward his wife. Wait, Clara did what? Is that true? Clara glanced wildly between her husband and son, cornered at last by her own web of deceit. Aiden misunderstood. I was just trying to provide the lifestyle he deserves. I almost admired her stubborn arrogance, still convinced her selfish decisions had been justified and could simply be waved away. She wasn't even ashamed of stealing from her own child. It would have been pathetic if her actions hadn't destroyed so many innocent lives, including Aiden's. As we left Clara and Ethan arguing bitterly in the entry hall, I drew Aiden into a fierce hug. I'm taking you home with us tonight, I declared firmly. We'll get things settled, come up with a plan. Over my shoulder, I glimpsed Clara pacing as she shouted shrilly into her phone, likely calling wealthy friends to bemoan her awful in-laws who refused to bankroll her lifestyle any longer. That night, Aiden fell into restless sleep on our couch, emotions spent. My husband and I lay awake, clutching each other in the pre-dawn darkness, both yearning for the peace and happiness torn apart by one woman's obsession with material wealth. Over the following weeks, we managed to recover a portion of Aiden's college savings from the bankrupt investment scheme. Between those rescued funds, scholarships, and a reasonable loan, Columbia remained blessedly within reach. Away from his mother's poisonous presence, Aiden began smiling more often, embracing simple pleasures again rather than demand privileges and status. Ethan initiated divorce proceedings soon after, finally accepting that Clara would never change her selfish ways, not even for their son. She received the divorce petition while vacationing in St. Bart's with her socialite girlfriends, likely on Ethan's dime once again. As summer waned into autumn, stories trickled back to me of Clara's public disgrace. With her supply of easy money cut off, she now struggled keeping up appearances among her judging wealthy circles. I took some small satisfaction knowing she now reaped the consequences after so callously gambling away our family's financial and emotional well-being for her own gain. The golden leaves had begun to fall when I drove Aiden to the airport, his trunk packed for move-in weekend at Columbia. My eyes brimmed as I held his handsome face between my hands. I'm so proud of you, I whispered fiercely, and I know one day you'll pay this opportunity forward. He hugged me tight, his chest swelling with a deep breath. I will, Grandma. Thank you for everything. I watched my grandson walk confidently toward his future until he disappeared. Turning away, I raised my face to the brisk autumn breeze. Our family still bore scars from Clara's obsessive greed, but the healing had also begun at last.